Welcome to our first podcast. It's a little bit rough around the edges.
We have no idea what we're doing. We're so lost here, but please just listen anyway. I swear it gets better. I swear. Please. Okay, thanks for watching.
Watching?
So used to YouTube, Debbie. G'day Battlers and welcome to the G'day Battlers podcast, Road to Worlds edition. I'm PvPSteve.
And I'm debbiepebble. And in this series, we'll be talking to each of the 2023 Play Pokemon World Championship contenders from the land down under as we head to Yokohama, Japan.
In this episode, we'll be talking to ValiantVish and FishyLegs 2, the Brisbane regional champion and runner-up, the first two to qualify for Worlds this season from Australia. ValiantVish has an impressive resume, reaching the top 12 in the 2022 World Championships and making it to the top 4 at OCIC. And FishyLegs 2 performing incredibly well at his first ever Play Pokemon tournament in Brisbane. Let's get into it. G'day, Battlers! Alright, ValiantVish, FishyLegs 2, welcome into the first episode of the G'day Battlers podcast. I guess we'll start off with introductions. Not that you two need intros to the Australians in the audience, but to those who might know you, we'll start off with FishyLegs 2. Sort of give us a brief introduction, who you are, your in-game name, where you're from, and what brought you into Pogo in the first place.
Yeah, g'day. I'm Blair, FishyLegs 2, as I'm more widely known. I'm originally a Taswegian, but I've recently moved to Queensland. Yeah, I've been playing Pogo since the beginning. I took a year off here or there, but been mad keen PvPer ever since it came out.
Yeah, and ValiantVish, welcome in as well.
Hey all, so in-game name is ValiantVish, or my actual name is Vishal. I am based in Sydney, Australia, although I've got several homes around the world. What brought me into PvP? I started Pokemon Go, from day 2 actually, and just been sort of a casual since the Go Battle came out. That's when I actually really got started into PvP. Played from the very beginning itself, although it wasn't very good. But I sort of started to take it a little bit more seriously around season 3, season 4, off we go in terms of PvP for me.
That's fantastic. Now, let's go back to, we've already touched base a bit on PvP. Fishy, how did you get into PvP? As in, what was the first baby steps? How did you, dive in?
Yeah, I remember when the PvP first came out. This is before Go Battle League dropped, and me and a few of my local mates that I was going to uni with would just sort of set like a CP limit. So they say like 2100, pick 3 mons, and we just fight each other with whatever random stuff we had at that CP level. And I thought that was the duck's guts, and that it would be great if we could do that online. Then they dropped GBL, which was amazing. And then through Discord and the Arena Australis Discord server, I got into Sylph stuff, and I've been hooked ever since my first Sylph tournament.
So we've played every single season of Sylph?
No.
Okay.
I started end of season 2, I think.
Okay, cool. And now back to Vish. When you've already briefed over a couple of your seasons, what's your favourite part of PvP at the moment?
At the moment, it's probably the regional circuit. I really enjoyed the regional circuit at the moment, although it's been a while since we all participated.
Yeah, now obviously the regionals, as you said, have sort of been a little bit front-loaded in the Australian season. It wasn't originally that way. Dates did move around a little bit, but regardless, we're here to talk about the very first one of the season, which was the Brisbane 2022 Play Pokemon Regional, where you both did, sort of decently well. It was the first tournament of the sort of move update that brought us the Noctowl, Lantern, Trevenant core, although with it being it was literally the first regional in the world. So going into this one, I'll start off with you, Fishy Legs. How did you sort of prepare? How are you feeling as you're sort of going into this tournament with a meta that hadn't really been played before?
Yeah, look, it was a little bit stressful because I think the meta changed on the Thursday. We played on Saturday, so it was like, all right, here's the update. Wing attack's being buffed. Go have fun. So I mean, prior to that, I was always already looking ahead into what was meta and assuming that most things would stay the same. But I knew I really wanted to bring Lantern before then. And then as soon as the wing attack buff came in, I was like, right, Lantern has to come because it's just going to be a flying season out there. And so then I sort of built my team around Knockdown and Lantern.
Yeah, and was it sort of similar for you, Vish, or were you sort of going it a bit of a different way?
Yeah, so for me, when the so let's take it back, right? So I think the regional got announced in November, sort of early November, for December actually. So we only had 3 weeks till the Brisbane regional actually began. So I I actually just thought of cores that I was very comfortable in prior to the changes itself because we only had a day to sort of ready our teams and adjust. So I wanted to sort of go in with something I was a little bit more comfortable with. So I ran something sort of very, very similar in terms of what I actually ran in Melbourne. So I ran Licky, Registeel, Swampert, Metachamp, because I was sort of very comfortable with not only the regional format but also Go Battle League. And Noctowl was a pretty safe addition to the team because it added bulk, and it added that much needed coverage against Trevenant, but also opposing Licky Tongues, which I thought was really popular, just looking at a history of the Australian regionals. So yeah, Noctowl made sense. And then the last Pokemon was Frostlass. So I thought Frostlass was a pretty interesting choice there because it provided my team with much neutral offense that my team actually lacked. So I didn't really have much offense in terms of the Pokemon I was running, and I thought Frostlass sort of was like a key player in what I actually needed.
Yeah, and I suppose with it being the season that had a wing attack buff, Flyers were sort of expected to make a bit more of a showing. So there are a few more Pelipers running around than we sort of, I guess, than the current meta would have, even though it's a sort of very similar meta. People were just sort of generally bringing things they thought would be good. And so Frostlass sort of being a counter to those Flyers potentially has a little bit of utility there as well. But I mean, I feel like I've talked to you before, obviously, and you sort of very much have that consistent mindset in regards to being comfortable with your teams and whatnot. When you sort of arrived, how confident were you going into the tournament as to how you were sort of, I guess, how you expected to go?
I felt pretty good, to be honest. I actually set a plan 2 weeks prior in terms of preparation. So 2 weeks prior, I just sort of wanted to think about the team itself. So I came up with that core, the core four. And then I just sort of ran some other stuff to sort of supplement them. And then the week prior, I actually just got a few scrims in with Gone 1001 and Echo Mono. So I felt pretty good going into the event. And then with the Noctowl buff as well, the adjustments are pretty minor in terms of the team itself. So yeah, felt pretty confident going into it. Didn't really think I was going to win it. I just had sort of let's give it a good go and see how it goes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, Fishy Legs, this was your first Play Pokemon tournament. So potentially there were some other, I don't know, what were your sort of expectations going in for your first time competing?
Yeah, well, this was my first ever in-person tournament too, because I sort of missed that whole self in-person thing with COVID. So I was nervous for sure. I mean, obviously it wasn't as big of an event as some of the other regionals were, but my sort of expectations coming in were, number one, don't drop first round. That would be shocking. And then after after I got into settled in, I thought top 4 would be an awesome result. So I was well stoked to get second, that's for sure.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess take us through sort of on the day. How did your run sort of go going into the tournament?
Yeah, so my first opponent was I think Mr. Lay 97, and that was one of the hardest sets actually. Like he really pushed me to a close game 3, and I thought I'd just about had lost at round 1, but managed to pull off a close win. And then I had another local, I think, before facing Vish in round 3. So that was a fun little knockback into the losers bracket, going 0-2 against Vish, and then I paired up against my good mate Rick Fleury on the next round, and I thought things can't really get much worse from here, can they?
Yeah, I mean that's number 1 and number 2 from Melbourne last year, right? Back to
Yeah,
back.
exactly. And I was like, gee, this is a tough run. So I played well against Rick. He obviously played really well too, and that was a really close third game against Rick. Managed to come out on top. And then I played, I think, Basher Bolgod, who's another local, who's quite talented. Dank Broad, another teammate of mine. Gorn, 1001. And then Beats Boy for the losers finals before taking on Vish. So lots of rounds. I think it was 9 in total, and the only person to beat me was Vish twice. So it was great.
I'm surprised. I actually didn't know you took 9 rounds there. Yeah.
Yeah, how many?
That's a long tournament for you.
Like 5.
I think it was 5 or 6.
Yeah.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, the big benefit of staying up in the winners bracket is essentially as soon as you drop to the losers bracket, you have to double the amount of rounds that you have left to get through to the final. So round 3 is not like too early. A round 1 loss would obviously be a fair bit longer, but round 3 loss definitely sets you up for sort of a lot more battles to go. So Vish, with having the sort of, I guess, the shorter run, the cleaner run, how's it like sort of progressing through for you?
Yeah, it felt pretty good, honestly. So just in terms of experience, I obviously competed at the Melbourne regional in the previous year, so that sort of gave me a little bit of confidence going into this one, which in the sense is if you just keep winning, you're obviously feeling good, and you're playing a lot less battles, right? So my goal is just to try and sort of keep winning as much as I can. Yeah.
I mean, take us into round 3 a little bit. So it was the first time that the two of you faced off. Obviously, not knowing where the tournament was going to go from here, it's sort of interesting to look back on. How did that round sort of go? Because I'm looking at the scoreboard and there is a 0 there.
Yeah. I remember looking at Vish's team and going, "Oh, that Swampert looks a bit dicey." And obviously Vish, you knew the same. And so I knew Vish was going to be a tough nut to crack, regardless of team compositions. And so I was definitely a little bit shaky in the old fingers ahead of that game. And I just did not play how I would have liked, but Vish capitalized on all my sort of little errors and adjustments. So yeah, it was a no-brainer for him, I think.
Yeah, it was so just going into that matchup, Swamp was pretty good, looked pretty strong there, and yeah, it was just about sort of utilizing my Swamp very effectively. So I thought in game 1 you'd be trying to sort of bait out my Swamp with your Stunfisk or your Lantern. So I just needed to make sure that I had a check for those two in the back. So luckily, I made the right read in game 1, and sort of in game 2, I knew you were going to sort of adjust in that way, and luckily it sort of paid off in terms of calling that line. I think it was pretty RPS in game 2. But yeah, I had a pretty strong comp, but you had a really interesting team, and yeah, I just had to look at your mons, what's more flexible and what actually had to play against Swamp, and I just sort of anticipate what you were going to do there.
And then carrying on, so obviously ValiantVish takes it out 2-0, and then Fishy Legs fights through the losers bracket, fights through the losers finals against Beats Boy for the win, and then you face up again in the finals. And this is sort of a unique thing to play Pokemon. You don't see it in the Silph Arena, for example, where it's just sort of you face one opponent and you don't face them again in the tournament. In this format, you do have that potential to face each other again. So going into it, how are you sort of thinking of, I guess, Fishy Legs as someone who sort of lost that first go? You're here in the top two. How do you try and think about adjusting to ValiantVish's team?
Yeah. Look, I was buzzing after securing my place in the finals and knowing that I've locked in my Worlds invite. So I think my headspace was really clear. I think I was able to just sort of not stress too much about what's Fish going to bring, and just sort of bring 3 Mon that I'm comfortable with and have a lot of flexible play into his team. I don't recall the lines specifically now, but I think there was a lot of Noctowl, Sableye, Medi floating around. Just trying to make sure that I had sort of play into almost anything that he could bring, which paid off somewhat because I didn't get swept in the finals.
Yeah, it was a good set. Yeah, definitely. I just remember game 1 of the finals, the Licky into Noctowl.
Yes.
So you call that, and I'm like, oh, okay, this is gonna be an interesting set. So definitely, I remember losing the first game, and that sort of set me back a little bit. So I had to sort of adjust and think, right, like, well, how's Fishy gonna play? I don't think I won that many leads. I think I was neutral up until that final game. Yeah, that final game was definitely interesting. I was trying to play the long game a little bit in terms of trying to sort of bait you into bringing certain Pokemon, and it paid off. It was a good call, like from Yoyan, a very brave call to bring A9 there. But yeah, luckily I anticipated that, and it worked out well for me.
Yeah, so obviously, like, you played sort of 4 games. They were relatively sort of neutral and close, really good games. It was 2-2. It's a best of 5 in the winners final. So if ValiantVish were to win the last game, then championship went to him. And then if Fishy Legs took it out, then it would go to a bracket reset, and there'd be another set of 5. But for those who sort of haven't read between the lines, Fishy Legs, did you want to sort of mention how that game went specifically?
Yeah. So game 5, I thought it'd be really clever if I led A9 and tried to catch either the Swampert or the Medi in lead, which I think Vishy had been running at least one of those, at least both of those once, I think, in the set already.
Yeah.
And you anticipated that rather well by bringing your Reggie in the lead, which is obviously quite a hard answer. I think I just went to Sableye and you met me with either Licky or Knockdown, and it was just done from there, I believe.
Yeah.
Nowhere to go. But look, at the end of the day, I was more than stoked just to be battling in the finals with you, to be honest.
Yeah, no, it was definitely a good set. I honestly, just going into the regional itself, just set sort of minimal expectations. I knew I was a good battler already from my previous experience, but important to sort of go into a lot of these tournaments with a clear mindset and not setting too high or low expectations for yourself. So yeah, I was just completely chuffed with how Swiss went, or how the first set of rounds went. And once I got into the grand finals, I knew I locked my invite. I knew I wanted to sort of take that one step further and actually try and win one. So Fishy, I mean, you pushed me well there at the end, and it was definitely a very good set.
And look, so you both walk away. You've got invitations to the World Championships. Massive celebration. Obviously, we went out for dinner afterwards. But how did you sort of celebrate afterwards? Sort of once you went home, like, did you tell friends and family? Did you tell the people at work? Like, how did you sort of celebrate your sort of, I guess, getting the first 2 tickets to the World Championships from Australia? I mean, Fishy Legs, if you want to kick it off.
Sure, yeah. After making it to the grand finals, I think after one losers finals, I think I got on the phone to Mum. I was like, "Hey, guess what? I qualified for Worlds," and she was like, "What? What do you mean?" I was like, "Yeah, looks like I'm going to Japan." So she was like super stoked. And that was great. I had my partner Emily there with me too, and she was super happy for me. She was great support for me all day. And then yeah, I guess just telling a lot of my friends and local community, what I'd achieved. I was really stoked, and I've been slowly sort of breaking it at work. It's always a bit of an interesting one to admit that you play competitive Pokemon Go to your colleagues, but they've all received it rather well, so it's been great.
Yeah, same with me. My wife didn't actually come with me to Brisbane this time around. She was there with me for the Melbourne regional. Just because it was last minute and everything. But yeah, just sort of keeping her up to date in terms of how I was going round to round. She doesn't really know much about Pokemon Go, but obviously just letting her know about the results and stuff. So it was really cool to sort of have like a virtual support team. I also had my faction teammates. It wasn't streamed, unfortunately, but they were up and they were just sort of wanting me to sort of keep them up to date as well. So yeah, it still hasn't hit me that we're going to Japan, but yeah, pretty stoked. Yeah, pretty stoked about going to Japan. That's going to be a good one.
Yeah, I mean, look, this was back in December, so there was still like a long sort of wait between the Brisbane Regional and the World Championships in August, which we still have a little bit of time to get to. But I mean, Vish, after this tournament, you then went ahead and participated in 2 more regionals. Well, I guess 1 regional and 1 IC in the Australian circuit out of our sort of total of 4. So can you just sort of like, obviously we're focusing on Brisbane today. You did pretty well in OCIC in particular. So did you want to sort of give us a bit of a insight into how you were sort of approaching OCIC as someone who already had a Worlds invite, and also just in general going into, I guess, the first OCIC for Pokemon Go?
Yeah, surprised I did that well, to be honest. But yeah, my motivation for going to this one was, even though I already secured the invite and the travel package, I just wanted to compete on stream because I only had one real experience, which is at Worlds. That was my motivation for going, was just to try and compete. I knew that we'd have a lot of the top Aussie competition there, Aussie and Kiwi. So that was my motivation. I did pretty well, although this time around, like, the experience was definitely a little bit different. I believe I lost in round 2 itself. So I was in losers bracket like the entire way. And I had never been in losers bracket before because I swept in Melbourne day 1 and then in Brisbane as well. So me losing that early was like a very different experience. But I value that experience as well, right? Like going through the losers bracket, because it really sort of put me under pressure every single game. I lost to Rocket Claire, actually. It was funny because the teams that I was expecting at OCIC was not what I faced or what I thought the meta was going to be. And I ended up going with a really anti-meta team because I wanted to try something sort of different. And I ran with a sort of common core, but I ran with Dunsparce and Shadow Counter Ninetales. No real experience with Dunsparce itself, but I brought Shadow Counter Ninetales to Worlds, so I had a bit of experience with that. And yeah, a lot of the teams that I was facing sort of throughout the tournament, it was quite rough. Like, I felt like I was in disadvantage with my team all up, but it was a really good experience because I had to try to sort of finagle my way through a lot of those matchups as well. So, and yeah, it was funny because I was actually meant to be on stream in round one, but I had some authentication issues as well. So I was like, oh man, that was my chance to get on stream. But luckily, I sort of pushed through the losers bracket, and I ended up being on stream quite a bit, sort of later in OCIC and in day 3 of OCIC as well. So the main thing for me was to just sort of get more comfortable with being on stream and sort of battling under pressure. And yeah, I felt like I achieved both of those.
Yeah, I mean, look, for someone who's just talking about the fact that it was their first time having to go into the losers bracket, just is such a flex for having already participated in 2 play Pokemon tournaments, right? But also, it is really key because I think this is something that a lot of people do say, is that the sort of experience in battling on stream is a little bit different to the experience of sort of not. There is that little bit of extra pressure. So getting that sort of, I guess, experience prior to Worlds probably helpful. And of course, you pushed through and ended up in 3rd at OCIC, which is not a bad effort. And obviously would already, if you hadn't already gotten your invitation in Brisbane, would have gotten you an invite from OCIC as well. So sort of like double qualified in that sense, and then sort of allowed Sniped Bra to take the sort of 5th place invitation to Worlds. But of course, OCIC is not ended for you. You sort of went to Sydney as well, which was sort of more recent. It was the final 4th out of 4 play Pokemon tournament in Australia. It was originally supposed to happen a little bit later than it did. The date got pushed forward, but before we sort of move on to Worlds this year, how's your sort of experience in Sydney going in as someone who is now double qualified?
Yeah, Sydney was an interesting one. So I didn't obviously achieve the results that I wanted to achieve. I lost to, so I placed in top 16, but ended up losing to Rick Flareon and who was I play? Oh, Inner Bloom? Yeah. So I ended up losing to both of them, both very competent and skilled battlers in their own right. And I had the right preparation as well, but I think again, the team let me down a little bit as well, just in terms of flexibility. And it taught me a few lessons in terms of how sort of the team building process, what my team building process would be like for a lot of these tournaments. Sometimes running sort of meta, sometimes running anti-meta, running a lot of flexible picks. So I think there's more a learning experience for me that I'll take on to future events. But yeah, top 16, still not bad, not ideally what I wanted, but it was, again, the main thing is just getting more experience in terms of team building, team preview, gameplay for Worlds, the better for me. So yeah.
Yeah, sounds fantastic that it's almost like building up credits. So then when you need to apply, then you're like, okay, I've got this much experience that, going in confidently. So definitely going through the circuit sounds like a good way to just refresh the skills and make sure the sword's still sharp heading into Worlds. Now, heading into Worlds, we're heading into Japan, to Yokohama. I want to know how you guys are going with that. Are we prepared? What are we doing leading up to Japan? We'll start with Fishy Legs.
Look, I am just trying to stay consistent. Keep playing at that high level, both in still factions and in sometimes in GBL. But I think once we know more about the meta that we'll have evolving after the potential moveset updates in June, I'll definitely start putting some serious time and effort into team building and scrimming and getting super familiar with the meta. For myself, I think that just learning team reads and learning how to predict people's lines and those sorts of things will be crucial. I think that the skills component is something that most of us have down pat at the world level. So yeah, that's sort of where I'll be spending my focus.
Yeah, no, and that makes total sense. How about for you, Vish? Are you taking some time off, or you still refreshing everything leading up to Worlds?
Yeah, definitely time off. I think my main motivation, at least for this season itself. So the season, I mean, like the GBL season, was just to hit legend, um, and then sort of take the game a little bit more casually. I just didn't want to be burnt out because I was competing in factions at the highest level. I was obviously trying to sort of compete in GBL as well at the highest level. So and the regional circuit as well. So it was a little bit draining after Sydney. So my goal was to just sort of hit legend and then take a little bit of a break. So I am still on that break a little bit, but I am playing sort of factions every now and then. I'm not a starter on my faction at the moment, so trying to sort of fill in and help out, but still sort of making sure that I am still with the game. So I do play my GBL sets every now and then, attend the faction calls, just so I don't sort of lose too much out of touch until, like Fishy mentioned, June. And June is when we're all going to start our preparation, right? So once we know the meta, I think that's when the work begins.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's hope there is some changes, given that we've been running pretty much the same thing for the last 6 months. But yeah, we'll see what will happen when it comes to season changes, which is not too far along. Actually, even talking about Worlds, from the time of recording till Worlds, I think it's 11 weeks away. So it's not, well, the countdown is definitely on. Are you guys making a holiday out of it for during your trip to Japan, or any other recreational things while you're over there?
I won't be, unfortunately. Just I would absolutely love to make a whole trip out of it, but it's just a little bit of a price point for me. I'd already booked my flights and everything when the Go Fest in Osaka was announced, so I'm going to be missing that too, unfortunately. But that's okay. I'll have fun either way.
That's okay. I'm
Yeah.
sure there'll be plenty of friends that will trade you whatever exclusive there is over there. How about you, Vish?
Yeah, definitely making a holiday out of this one, even though I'm on negative leave. So I had to put some additional time in and additional hours in to sort of make it up. But yeah, I'll be out there for 3 weeks. I'll be out there for GoFest, traveling with my wife as well. So it'll be a good balance of Pokemon Go and also sort of some downtime as well. Seeing Japan, I've never been to Japan before, so yeah, looking forward to it.
Excellent. And I suppose Vish, being such a having such a long resume in regards to the Pokemon Go PvP scene, what would be your parting advice for, let's say, even Fishy Legs here, for stepping into Worlds for the first time?
I think it's important to remember that you were invited to compete at the World Championships for a reason, right? Because you've already proven that you are one of the best battlers in the country. So just to remember that, because this game it can be very unforgiving, right? No matter what format you're in, whether it's Go Battle League or Show 6 Pick 3. Sometimes the confidence can be really low, and you start to question your ability. But yeah, just to always remember that everybody who has been selected to compete at Worlds, there's a reason why you're there, and to use that confidence when you're going into battle. Yeah, you'll be coming up against some of the best battlers in the world, and it can be quite intimidating. But I think as long as you remember that you're there for a reason and you stay focused on executing skills, not worry about anything else, anyone can make a deep run. So yeah, that's what I would say.
I think that is really key advice, of course, because if you're someone who has competed at the World Championships, that is an absolutely massive accomplishment. There's already that sort of tagline that'll be carrying around on your resume from here on out. So I think that both of you deserve some serious congratulations, because it just coming first and second in Brisbane Regional is a really worthwhile achievement. Obviously, you both had to play some pretty strong opponents. Vish, you had to play Fishy Legs twice to be able to take out that championship, and of course, Fishy Legs again, taking on both of the sort of last year's Melbourne at number 1 and number 2, two of last year's World's competitors you had to face. Essentially, you had 3 different rounds against world competitors, right? Just because you had to face Vish sort of the twice. So before we sort of run out, I really do want to thank you for sort of coming on. We do have one last really important question, and I think this is the question that more than anything, people have been wondering. Fishy Legs 2.
Yeah.
What is your go-to karaoke song?
Oh, it's gonna have to be All Star by Smash Mouth.
A classic.
Good choice. Good choice.
ValiantVish, you are getting the exact same question.
I would say Lose Yourself, Eminem. Yeah.
Come on.
A man after my own heart. Maybe after the World Championships is done and the celebrations are on, potentially we get those 2 songs playing. I don't know. What do you guys reckon?
Let's do it.
Definitely on the cards.
All right, I'll definitely see you there. But with that said, that brings us to the end of the podcast today, focusing in on Brisbane Play Pokemon Regionals and getting to meet ValiantVish and Fishy Legs too. So, I mean, Fishy Legs, did you want to sort of give us, tell us where people can sort of find you, like your Twitter handle, just so they can sort of keep up to date and, maybe even message you for your grand advice as someone who is, going to Worlds, because there are still a few tournaments left.
Yeah, I think at FishyLegs2 is how you'll find me on Twitter. I can't guarantee that. I don't really keep up with it a lot. Otherwise, I am on Discord at FishLegs2. I'm in a lot of servers, so I'm sure people will find me floating around. Yeah.
Yeah, and Vish, I mean, thanks for coming on. Again, the double qualified. I honestly can't believe the statistic of the fact that you had not been to the losers bracket until your 3rd Play Pokemon tournament. It's wild to me. But
I mean, technically, I was in the losers bracket at Worlds, right? But I did go 3-0 before losing to Mato and Dancing Rob. Yeah.
I think that's still pretty good. I think that's pretty good. But where can people sort of find you and keep up to date with what you've got going on?
Yes. So Discord and Twitter as well. I think handle is ValiantVish_. And yeah, just anyone who needs some advice on Show 6 Pick 3 regional format, GBL factions. Just feel free to DM me as well. Happy to help out.
Yeah, brilliant. So those links will sort of be in the description of wherever we are as well. So go give these guys a follow and be prepared, because once the World Championships comes up in August, these 2 guys are definitely big contenders for going pretty far. So be wary, because we could have just been listening to the next Play Pokemon World Champion. So with that said, thanks again for both FishyLegs2 and ValiantVish for coming on. And with that, we'll say g'day.
Thanks for listening to our podcast. Join us next time with the OCIC champion and runner-up, Yokohama and Fish on a Heater. Follow our socials at G'day Battlers on Twitter and YouTube.
G'day Battlers, and welcome to the G'day Battlers podcast, Road to World Edition. I'm PvPSteve, and I'm debbiepebble.
I did not sound like that.
Sound a little like that.
I'm deeply offended, but also mildly amused because it does sound a little. Can you stop dying, please?
And in today.
Oh, I see it.
Yeah. You can get custom ones as well, right? Add sounds. There you go. Discord sounds.
That's terrible. You guys should not have.
Yeah, this is really funny.
What
we
was
were
my
we were
encounter?
contemplating of like using the sounds while during the podcast. We're like, oh, you know, it's like, oh yeah, and then you won Brisbane.
Yay!
Oh, and then I brought along the Ninetales into Registeel.
Oh, come on.
Oh man.